Hey, what's up guys? This is 3D Bonfire back with another amazing tutorial, and it's a new year 2024 and I'm already excited to learn new stuff and share it with you. Okay, so yeah, I just want to learn a lot of new stuff and I want to start this new year with a couple of style frame lessons. All right, so I already made a little announcement on my Patreon, and yeah, there are different projects that I want to talk about. So for example, this one, just to let you know, the full training about style frames will be on my Patreon this month. So if you want to learn more about design, Cinema 4D, Redshift and X particles, and hopefully in the future about Houdini, then this is the right place for you. I worked on this one just a couple of days in 2022. Alright, but still these style frames are holding up, okay, so they are not totally bad because it's like a year old or something like that, so I can still be proud of these ones. And yeah, so this project was for a German studio called Onformative, and the theme more or less was camping, okay, so this is the theme that we started with, and the project was for designing wallpapers for one of the big tech companies for their smartphones. Okay, so they always have like these pre-installed wallpapers and someone has to design them, and I was booked to design these wallpapers. They just gave me a little bit of a reference, but not so much. So the overall theme was think about camping in an abstract way. And I think I only got like a couple of references here, so you can see, I mean, this is almost not really camping, but for example, you can think about this as a camping object where you can sleep on. And we are not about thinking like camping in a super realistic way, like with a tent and with trees and stuff like that, but more about abstract patterns that we can find in, for example, camping objects, and for example, like this one. Okay, so you can think about details like these ones, and of course for a smartphone wallpaper you could just do something like this pattern as a wallpaper and this could already look beautiful. Okay, so when you get themes like this one, you always have to think about like a design pattern or some details which will just look beautiful as a simple element in a wallpaper background. And when I say wallpaper, I just mean these pre-installed, yeah, I think you say wallpaper to it, right, that are already on your phone and with a beautiful design in the background of your smartphone. Okay, so yeah, what they also liked were maybe some connecting elements like these ones, which you find maybe when you build your tent where you sleep on when you camp, but then you know there are like these connectors. And of course this one is not from a camping object, but it also connects like furniture together. So for example, this one could be a nice design element which we can use in the design, or something like this one. Also like these metal connections like you can see it here, or for example something with leather stripes, or this one like an interesting folding of textile and fabrics. Okay, so this one is really like an abstract interpretation of something which is really just a little bit inspired by camping. Okay, so these were the references, but then in these 4 days, so day 1, 2, 3 and 4, and you can see that I started with the camping theme here, but then already in the process on day 2, 3 and 4, we focused more on something which is really abstract. Okay, something like these stripes here, like these angles. And I think that we quickly got away from the camping theme and tested out something which is a bit more classic for these wallpapers, like these arcs here. Okay, so I can totally see this one as a smartphone background, and intentionally I designed these images a little bit more big so that later you can just focus on, for example, an area like this one. Okay, so this one could be a nice wallpaper for your background, or you could also do the same thing here. Okay, so maybe you just want to have this one on your wallpaper, something like this one. Okay, so I made these images intentionally a little bit bigger and a bit more complex so that later you can zoom in and just say that you think like this one is enough that you want to see. And most of the time these smartphone wallpapers are just a bit more simple, so most of the time they are not complex like this one, but only like, for example, this frame here, okay? All right, but let me zoom out for a second and just let's go through these 4 days so that you get an idea how my process is on each day and what like a typical studio or agency can expect of a trained motion designer to give them as an output per day, okay? So for example, I started here with day 1 and you can see that this one is like an abstract interpretation of the camping theme. So I did like this abstract tent here, and back then in 2022 Cinema 4D didn't have the new cloth engine, so back then I did the cloth simulation in Marvelous Designer. But today, maybe when we do example here, then we can totally do the cloth simulation nowadays in Cinema 4D 2024. And yeah, you can see there is a lot of abstract camping theme inside of these examples. So I got these connection elements, and for example this one here, you can see that this one was totally inspired by the reference the client gave me. And overall, I mean, the thing is, most of the time I just build like one complex element like this one, and this could take like, I don't know exactly, so I don't want to under or overestimate my time here, but for example, this one could be built like in 4 hours probably, okay, when you build it from scratch. But then when you have something like this one, then you can easily create a lot of different angles from it, a lot of different designs when you just move your camera around and, for example, change the material on the main elements, all right, and you rotate your light around. And this is stuff that we will do later. So most of the time you just build a beautiful design element, and then you can explore it with your camera, with the light and the materials, and create easily like 20 versions or something like this one out of it. And you can see, for example, here I just changed the material, and honestly, I mean, this one, I don't see this one really as a smartphone background. Okay, so this one was like a pretty bad example because this is just way too wild. And as I said, when you want to have something as a wallpaper for your phone, then it shouldn't be like that wild and loud like this one, but maybe only something like this one, for example, okay? So it should be way more reduced. But as I said, we wanted to design like a bigger picture where we can zoom in and just search for the right image, all right? But as I said, these ones, they are pretty wild, but then you can see, you can just go in with your camera and get some beautiful close-ups here. So for example, this one could be nice. Well, not super nice, but you get the idea, okay? And you can just see I created a lot of different shots from this one. And as I said, this was day 1 and I started pretty wild, but then later in the process we reduced it a bit more. But you can see that you can get some really nice shots of a stage like this one when you just create a complex 3D element, and yeah, you just zoom in and work with depth of field and stuff like that. Okay, so the next approach was to have like some inflated things like these ones, and I was inspired by this one, of course, but I just changed the pattern from this one to something more like this one. And yeah, I just went really abstract here, so you can get some beautiful angles here. And I think this one, for example, is better because, as I said, you don't want to have too much details in your final image, but you want to have something more simple like this one, for example. These ones, they are also pretty nice. And yeah, it was just fun to play around here, honestly, and apply different materials here. And once again, for this one here, for the inflated object, I once again used Marvelous Designer back then. But when we will do something like this one later in the design lessons, we will definitely use Cinema 4D 2024, okay? So this was day 1, and yeah, this one is pretty wild. I think this one is really nice, okay? So you can also search for angles in this 3D file. And I mean, yeah, the approach was pretty much the same like with this one here, okay? So I built an element like this one first, but then in the second approach I built an element like this one, and once again you can go into it and search for beautiful angles. And I think the most beautiful would be, for example, this one, okay? So you can just find something nice here. For example, I could now cut this one out, and this one could be nice for your wallpaper, for your background, okay? But yeah, let's jump over to day 2. And already here, my art director told me, hey, camping, it's nice and cool, but let's try something a bit more classic, and let's work with this design idea that you can see a lot actually in wallpapers, that you just have some beautiful arcs for example, like these ones, okay? And once again, I started with building a complex shape, but then you just go in with your camera and search for beautiful angles, and you can see that you can get a lot of beautiful shots here, okay? So yeah, I mean, I just played with different materials, and honestly, the thing is that the simpler they are, the better they will work for a smartphone wallpaper, for example, okay? So for example, this one, this could work pretty nice in your background because it's not that distracting. But of course, when you get a design task like this one, you just want to play a little bit and go a little bit more wild. But then in the end, probably something like this one is too complex, and something like this one will be better, okay? And yeah, I think for a first design task here, when we go into the practical part in Cinema 4D, we definitely want to build some stuff like these ones, okay? And you can see here are different other examples that I created. I played with the material here. For example, when you put a glow material beneath this one, then you get like this golden glow here, and I think this one is also like a pretty beautiful example. And the nice thing is, even when you have like simple design elements, when you just give them a beautiful bevel here, then you can see that you get so beautiful details, and already with simple design elements you get something really powerful. And yeah, for example, this one, just with a nice bevel and the beautiful lighting, you already have like a powerful image. This one was more like a failed attempt here, so this one is not so powerful. This is just a cloner system, but it doesn't make so much sense, alright? Then another idea was to play with furniture in an abstract way, alright? So you can see these examples here, but they didn't make it in the end. But I have to say, still you get some beautiful angles here. All right, so these are quite some nice ideas, but it didn't work out in the end. You can also see here, for example, this is just a chair cloned on top of each other with a small focal length, like 15 in your camera. And then you get these beautiful angles here, once again with the depth of field. All right, and you can see that this one is even more extreme, and this one is even more extreme. Then I continued to play with different shapes, for example these ones. All right, so this one is also pretty interesting. So maybe I also want to show you how you can create these beautiful shapes here. Okay, so let's just see, and let's jump over to day 3. And then more and more we played with these beautiful shapes, with the simple elegant shapes. Yeah, all right, so yeah, you can see there are a lot of examples, and it's just about to make these ones really perfect here. All right, so this is like really sharp and beautiful, and then you move your light around, apply different materials, and you can get a lot of beautiful results out of something like this one. Okay, so this one is more technical and a little bit cold, but yeah, this was just the art direction that we went for here. And you can see I created a lot of different versions here. And yeah, what else can I say? So this one is also pretty interesting. And I think when you just create something like this one, you can just create a lot of beautiful shots out of it. All right. Then also on day 3, I played a little bit with furniture. Okay, so this one is also kind of cool. All right. It's basically a chair, which is a little bit deconstructed, and I added additional cushions here and there to get something more abstract. And yeah, this one is also a nice solution, especially I like this one, all right, with the simple shapes, where it's a little bit more abstract. You can still feel that this could be a cushion from a chair, but yeah, it just is a little bit more abstract and reduced to its beautiful shapes. So I can even see, and this one zoomed in to, for example, let's just see this one. All right, this one could be a nice solution for your wallpaper, where you just have these beautiful shapes and angles, and it's not so obvious that it is a chair, for example. Here are some cloned chairs, and let's just see this one. That's also pretty nice. Okay, so I'm sorry, we are almost through it, okay, day 4, and you can see that I continued to play with these shapes here. We did more exploration here. All right, so in a project like this one, you just have to produce a lot of variations, and even if they are pretty similar, you should not get tired to produce different shots out of your 3D file. Okay, so you can see I created lots of different angles here. This one is also pretty nice with the material. And yes, so in the end, here are more explorations of the cushions of the chair. Okay, so for example here, once again, when I zoom in, then maybe this one is interesting. But anyway, so you can see that in a short booking here of 4 days, most of the time I create lots of different versions for my client. And of course, today, maybe as a little side note here, some agencies also use artificial intelligence to give you some initial ideas. So sometimes they come up with not references like these ones, but they just prompt something. For example, they go to Midjourney and type in abstract camping rendered with Redshift, all right? And they get like different ideas. And then sometimes they give me like a reference where they already have a feeling like we could go into this direction, but then still the next step would be that the 3D artist comes into play and put this more into the version with the art director together that they really like. So you can just be way more precise when a 3D artist and the art director work together to nail down what they have in mind. So these prompting things are just, yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, of course, but it looks like AI is just a part of the process in some studios nowadays. But don't worry, there is still a lot to do for 3D artists, and it's no excuse to not know your tools to build scenes, to light scenes, to texture scenes, all of the skills that you will learn in the process of building style frames. This is just essential stuff, okay? So don't worry about AI development. If you know these fundamental skills of working in 3D, you will always be superior to someone who just types in a prompt, okay? But let's not talk too much about AI here, and maybe I said something stupid right now, okay? I'm sorry for that. My thinking is just that as a 3D artist, you should know that stuff, how to build stuff, how to create stuff, how to design stuff. And this is what you will learn in these design lessons here. All right, so I think for the first practical part in Cinema 4D, I just want to build some element like these ones, okay? And you will learn something about splines, about modeling, and just to create these perfect angles here. And the lighting, I mean, this one looks simple, but let's start with something simple. You can also see it here, and it's just fun to create these shapes, all right? And then just move the light around and put materials onto it. So let's start simple in Cinema 4D, and you can see I started with a shape like this one here. But of course, now we want to build this one from scratch. So let's jump into Cinema 4D, into our first lesson, and have some fun.